Welcome, everyone. We'll just give people a few minutes to join before we'll get started here. Thanks for joining us so early in the morning for everyone. We really appreciate you taking the time. So just as you enter, keep your microphone on mute, and we'll just give people about 3 minutes longer to join in before we get started. Welcome, everyone. Just so you know, we'll be starting very shortly on our Yay Enterprising Youth Sustainability Series, Episode 2 on ITC's Sustainability Map and how to navigate the tool. Just so everyone knows, please keep your microphones on mute and we'll be getting started very shortly, just giving people some time to check in. Great. So welcome, everyone. Once again, thanks for joining us so early in the morning. We appreciate it. Shows your dedication to learning. This is Yay Enterprising Youth, our sustainability mini series, which is part of our Learn track. We're really happy to again have experts from ITC's T4SD, Trade for Sustainable Development team here with us today. And we're going to be building on the work of our episode 1, talking about what is sustainability and why it matters. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about ITC's sustainability map and how to best use the tool for yourself to help your business. So we're really lucky to have Akshata Lemay and Florence Moser, who are going to be leading this discussion today. Just for some logistics, this episode will be recorded. It's also being streamed live on the Yay Community Facebook. We'll also share the slides and a recap on the Yay Community website after the episode is over. Please keep your microphones muted and feel free to post your questions in the chat box throughout the session. Don't wait until the end. We'll be sure to get to them later on in the session. So yeah, I think that's all for the logistics. So I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Akshata. Over to you.
Thank you, Claire, and good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. And as Claire mentioned, I'm happy to see so many people joining us early in the morning. My name is Akshata Limay, and I work as an international consultant with the Trade for Sustainable Development program. And with us, joining us today, we also have Florence Moser, who is an advisor, and Mr. Matthew Lamole, who is a senior advisor at the T4SD program. And as the topic goes today, we will be discussing what ITC Sustainability Map is about and how you can navigate it, and also give you an introduction to various tools available on the sustainability map. As Claire also mentioned, that this is the second episode of our webinar series on sustainability. We would just like to understand if our participants today have already attended the previous session, or whether this is the first time you're attending it, so that we know if we have to go over or revise certain concepts again for better understanding of this topic at large. So Claire, can I request you to open the poll, please? That's great. So you can see this question on your screen right now. Did you attend our previous webinar? If you did, please click yes. If no, please click no. No pressure, or it's totally fine if you're attending this for the first time. There's no reason to be intimidated by this question. Just so we know if we need to repeat some concepts, and we are happy to do that. So we'll reserve about 10 seconds so that you can answer this question, and then maybe we can see the results and move on with the presentation. Okay, so we have about like 50-50, I would say, almost. So I think it would be a good idea that we revise certain topics. Okay, great. So with this, maybe we can move on to the next slide, please. So what do we have on our agenda today? So we will recap the concept of voluntary sustainability standards, which Florence had already touched upon in our previous webinar. But since it is important in our discussion today, as we will be highlighting our standards map module, we will go over this concept once again. I just request all the participants to put their microphones on mute so we have no disturbance. Thank you. And okay, so after that, we will take a tour of the ITC sustainability map, understand what is it, what does it have to offer, which are the various tools that you can use for your business or just for academic interest, whatever your motivations are. And then my colleague Florence will help us navigate through the standards map module. And we have an interesting case study for you all. Florence will help us understand standards map module with the help of this example. And finally, of course, we will open up the floor for any questions that you may have, and our senior advisor Matthew will join us to engage with the audience and give in his expertise. And so I highly encourage all of you to write your questions. Even if you have comments or feedback, it's welcome, but mostly questions that we can address after the end of the presentation. So okay, so I guess let's begin with our topic today. Thank you, Claire. So what are voluntary sustainability standards, or VSS? The United Nations Forum on Sustainability Standards has defined, or rather explained, the concept of VSS as rules that producers, traders, manufacturers, retailers, or service providers may be asked to follow so that the things they make, grow, or do not hurt people and the environment. These standards help keep workers healthy and safe, protect communities and land, and uphold human rights, as well as moderating the environmental impact of production and consumption. So as we can see from this definition, or the concept, that while it may seem like it would majorly focus on environmental protection, that's not really the case. The gambit of VSS is quite wide, and it also encompasses within it various themes such as even ethical sourcing and trading, social labor conditions, human rights obligations, etc. And here at ITC, we recognize various pillars of sustainability such as environment, social requirements, management, ethics, quality, etc. And while we are continuing with this discussion, we have actually an interesting poll for you, because as I explained earlier, VSS are rules that service providers, retailers, producers may have to follow. But are these rules really legal requirements? So we would like to know your opinion. What do you all think? So maybe we can launch a poll here, please. So, what do you think? Are VSS legal requirements? It's a fairly straightforward question, and just feel free to answer. Even if you don't know the right answer, it's completely all right. Maybe we can take a few seconds here so that you can answer it.
I'll just give everyone 10 more seconds to vote and then close the
Sure.
poll.
If any new participants have joined us in the meantime, I welcome all of you. Uh, Oh, wow. So the majority has already answered that no, they do not think that VSS are legal requirements. And while some of you think that they may be legal requirements, let me get to the explanation. So the majority is absolutely right. VSS are not legal requirements, but they have in a way become somewhat a soft obligation because of the market conditions and the demands of the market. From the buyers and the consumers' perspective, because of the growing awareness of sustainability and the rising demand for sustainable products and services, the manufacturers, producers, or service providers have started to feel the need to comply with these certifications or even follow these VSS, because you want your product or services to be competitive in the markets. And therefore, we would say that VSS are not legal requirements, but they have definitely become soft obligations in a way. And while the concept of VSS might not seem very familiar, like it's not a terminology that maybe we use in our day-to-day parlance, but we definitely have some understanding of VSS, and we'll quickly get to why and how. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So there are these logos in front of you, and I'm sure when you look at these visuals, it strikes a chord. You must have seen some of these logos or labels on the products that you purchase. We had actually conducted a short survey in our first episode on to understand which standards are our audience familiar with. And overwhelmingly, most of our audience already knew fair trade or OOTS certifications. And obviously there are different logos that you see in front of you, and it is quite obvious that not all of them actually relate to agricultural products. If you look at TourCert, it's quite clear that it may be, related to tourism sector. If you look at aluminium stewardship initiative, it becomes quite obvious that it may relate to aluminium supply chain. But there is larger complexity at play, because one aspect that we discussed so far was the subject scope of it. Which products or services do these voluntary sustainability standards apply? But if you are a producer or manufacturer, you may have different questions, such as whether these certifications are even available in your area, whether these certifications are popular or known in the areas where you're trying to export your products or services. So there is a lot of complexity. And if a producer were today to decide and research on these standards to see what is the best fit for them, it could be a tedious and long drawn process. And this is exactly where sustainability map tool comes handy and helps our users. So maybe if we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, on the screen, you see a snapshot of various offerings that the sustainability map has to offer. ITC sustainability map enables users, regardless of their position in the value chain, to better understand the sustainability landscape and to connect with business partners. And you see there are three different modules. The first module, standards map, is something that we are going to be focusing on in detail today in this session, in the later part of the presentation. And just to give you an introduction, it is a neutral repository of information of voluntary sustainability standards, which may include different schemes, even conventions for that matter. And we have over 280 standards currently on our database. Secondly, the virtual network platform, it offers an online gateway where businesses can promote their sustainable practices. So they gain visibility and are able to connect with the international buyers. And lastly, we have market trends, which offers you verified information on how the global market share has evolved when it comes to certified or verified products. And of course, the information is available in more interactive charts and graphs, so it's easier to read and it's more user friendly. And we had also shared one of our publications on the State of Sustainable Markets 2020 report in the previous webinar. And you can find it on this particular module, and it would be an interesting read. So I encourage you to have a look at it. Maybe now we can move to the next slide, please. That's great. Okay, so this slide essentially gives you an idea of various offerings that are available on our standards map module. We, as I mentioned earlier, we have more than 280 standards already published on our standards map module. What you can do with this information, there are various things that are possible. Firstly, you can quickly scan through it. You can click on a particular standard to get to know about more about the organization. You can get to know about various requirements that you need to meet with to get certified by the standard, and even to understand the process of getting the certification. What are the audit requirements? What are the costs if you want to get certifications, etc. Then secondly, you can compare two standards to one another, not in the way of which standard is better than the other, but in a way that which standard is a better suit for you, which standard suits you better, or which one you would prefer in your unique situation. Thirdly, you can, if you want to compare a particular standard or rather set it as a reference against a few other standards that may be available in the sector or the region, that is a possibility as well. And finally, one of the most interesting features we have is a self-assessment tool, whereby you can actually enter the information of check what the requirements are and understand what are the gaps that you may have to fill before you can apply for a certain certification with the standard setting organization or certifiers. So can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, this is just it offers you a URL to our sustainability map. And of course, towards the end of the presentation, we will also be mentioning in the chat box, so don't worry about it. So maybe we can jump to the next slide. Okay, great. So in next two slides, I'm going to quickly run through various features of, or rather the structure of how you can see the information on the standards map module. But don't worry about it if you feel like I'm rushing through it, because Florence is going to help us understand in a much more systematic way. So firstly, you can see on the top of the on the top, you can see there is a search option, whereby there are various filters that you can apply to come up with a short list of standards that may be relevant to you. You can of course search the standard by name, in which case it is very straightforward, or you can search different standards that are available as per the sector that you're functioning in or a specific product that you're selling. You can also have a look at various filters on the producing region or country, and finally also the destination where you want to export the product or your service. Once you apply all of these filters, as you can see below, there will be a list of various standards that will appear that kind of are the result of the filters that you have applied. And in the next slide, we will see how the visuals appear when you click on specific standards. Thank you, Claire. So on this slide, you can see on the left, there is an image where you can see there are three standards that have been chosen, and one particular standard, the global organic textile standard, has been clicked on. So what you see below is the information vis-a-vis that particular standard. There are, as you can see, different pillars: environment, social, management, quality, and ethics. And right below that, there are two graphs. On the pie chart, you can see the ratio of various pillars that are used in terms of requirements in a particular standard. And on the right hand side, in the bar graph, you can see the timelines vis-a-vis the compliance of these requirements. What we also encourage our users to do is to click specifically on the options at the bottom. As you can see, environment, social, management, etc. When you click on those particular topics, there is a list of requirements that open up where you can understand. There's more granular information and you can understand in detail what requirements are covered under those pillars. But having said all of this, I don't mean to confuse anyone, or I don't want to rush through. So how about we take a journey to understanding standards map a little better. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Claire. Thank you. What we are going to be doing today is, now we will step into John's shoes, and let's try and navigate through standards map through his vision and through his perspective. So John is a Tanzanian coffee producer, and he wishes to explore the EU market to export his coffee. And he's dealing with various questions. Firstly, which standards are recognized in the potential destination market, that is EU, where he's trying to export coffee. So coffee sector becomes an important filter. Which standards apply to coffee produced in Tanzania? So since he's located in Tanzania, which standard should he be looking at? And once he has applied all of these filters and he has a list of standards that come up, what are the kind of requirements that he would need to comply with in order to get certification? What is the implementation mechanism? And of course, the important question, what could be the potential cost? So here I would like to request Florence to please help us and John figure out what is the best way to navigate standards map to help him answer all of these questions. Over to you, Florence.
Thank you so much, Akshata, and hello and good morning to everyone. It's great to be here. I actually recognize some names from last time, which is fantastic. So let's go on that journey. Claire, if we could have the next slide, please. Thank you so much. So here, let's look at what John would do. So the first thing he would do on the standards map module would be to pick the sector or product, so in his case, coffee. Then he would pick his producing country, Tanzania, and finally, the destination region or country, Europe, in his case. Once he does that, he will see that 31 standards will appear. These will be the shortlisted standards. If we go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So then let's say that out of these 31 standards, John is particularly interested in 3 standards. First, UTZ, so a label that looks at sustainable farming of coffee, cocoa, tea, and hazelnuts, and also a standard that's very frequently requested by buyers such as Lidl or Aldi. He will also want to look at EU Organic, which aims to ensure that products are produced using natural substances and processes. And then finally, he's also interested in BRCGS, which is a food safety standard. So if he wants to learn more about UTZ, he will click on that standard, which will then show him a color-coded graph of the areas of focus of the standard. So Akshata mentioned earlier that we consider sustainability to have 3 to 5 main pillars, which cover environmental issues, social issues, management, quality, and ethics. So in this case, the standard has a strong focus on environment, as well as a strong focus on good social practices. And it also has a sizable quality component, which is linked to quality management systems, for example. Then if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Then if John wants to learn about specific requirements, he can click on the specific subsections. So for example, the category environment will have detailed subsections for inputs or soil or water management and the like. So he can really really take a deep dive and explore that, really have at a really granular level, which is what Akshata alluded to earlier. So here, for example, John can learn specifically about the standards requirements on genetically modified crops, for example. And he can actually have if he clicks on it, he'll have a very clear example of the actual text from the standard in regard to genetically modified crops. Then if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the information on the standards is structured along 3 different tabs. So the first tab is the overview of the standard. So key features, organization details, etc. Then the second tab is the standards requirements. So that's the pie chart that we saw earlier, along with the environment, social, management, quality and ethics categories. And then finally, so on the third tab is the information about the scheme. So standard setting, audit procedures, costs, etc. Now, if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So sustainability map has a very, very useful feature that also allows users to compare the standards against each other. So in this case, John would pick the option compare side by side. Then if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So once he picks that option, John will get the following graph, which you can see on the screen. So John will see that compared to UTS and EU Organic, BRCGS will place more emphasis on the quality component, which obviously makes sense because BRCGS is a food safety standard that's going to look at quality assurance systems, for example. But whereas EU Organic Farming has a strong focus on the environment, which also is not surprising since EU Organic Farming encourages the maintenance of biodiversity and the responsible use of energy and natural resources, and the enhancement of soil fertility, among others. Then if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So here too, John can take a deep dive at the requirements and see which ones are covered by which standard. And this is the third tab that the one we were discussing earlier. So here we can tell that the 3 different standards will have, for example, different practices when it comes to auditing, since only one of them adapts its auditing practices to the location of the operator. And this is just one screenshot of the processes tab, which is actually a very long section that really allows the user to compare information and look at the differences, for example, in certification costs, for example, or audit procedures. And this might be certification costs, actually, for example, I'm mentioning that because it might be particularly relevant to the entrepreneurs we have on the call today. Then if we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And finally, a third very, very useful feature of Sustainability Map, and which might actually interest quite a few of you on this call today, is that users, or in our case, John, can take a self-assessment against one of the standards. So all he needs to do is to create an account and then take the self-assessment, so answer yes, no to the different questions that are going to pop up, which will then give him a diagnostic report showing him the gaps he still needs to fill. And on the next slide, you'll see an example of this diagnostic report. Thank you very much, Claire. So that's perfect. So here, for example, in this case, and that's really an example, but we could see that John is already quite close to fulfilling the standards requirements in the environment, social, management, and quality categories, but that he still has a little bit of work to do for ethics. And an important really note is that this is obviously, the self-assessment really is there to give users like John an idea of where they are on the sustainability journey, but is by no means an official process or an official result. So that's also quite important to flag as well. And then if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So as we wrap up today's presentation, what we have seen is that Sustainability Map is a useful tool to sort the different VSS and figure out which ones apply to one's product, one's circumstances, and one's location. The user can also look for general information. So for example, which standards apply to my product, but all the way down as well to the details. So for example, what are the standards requirements for soil, for example? And then if we look at it from a very concrete perspective of where we are today, COVID-19 disruptions to audit may mean actually that now could be a good time to research specific VSS requirements and draw a plan of action for those of you who are interested in certification or would like to know more about it. And Sustainability Map allows you to do that. We'll also let you know that actually a new version of the website will be rolled out in the first quarter of 2021, which will keep the same features. So that won't change, but will be a little more user-friendly and easier to navigate as well. So also be on the lookout for that in the next few months. And then if we can maybe go to the next slide. Perfect. Thank you very much, Claire. So that wraps up our presentation for today, but we're not done yet. We look forward to answering your questions today. Thanks very much for being on the call with us. And I look forward to bringing in our colleague Mathieu, who will be there to answer some of your questions. Back to you guys. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Florence. So I saw while I was doing the presentation that we had a number of back and forth already happening in the chat box, which is great. Happy to see that. And I will again share that slide with the information for Florence, Akshata, and Mathieu at the end of the session, so everyone can take a quick screenshot to make sure they have all the emails noted down. And of course, the presentation will be shared on the Yay community website, so you can review it at any time and click all the links. But yeah, now I'm going to hand it over to Yang, who's going to bring up some questions from the audience. So Yang, over to you.
Hello, everyone. This is Yang from ITC. So welcome all and bienvenue. And if you have questions in French, please also don't hesitate to ask, because we have colleagues who speak perfect French and who are happy to answer any questions you would have. But then I think my first question is asked in English from the registration. I think, yeah, two of them actually ask similar question about how to measure the sustainability, like as an organization. So maybe, so it's like the impact, or how to know your enterprise is sustainable or not. I think that's the question.
Thanks a lot for the question. Thanks also for the webinars, the participants, Florence and Akshata's presentations. That was really great. Measuring sustainability of an enterprise is really not an easy task. Obviously, there are different ways of doing it. The challenge is that there is no international definition for what sustainability really is. It depends on the country, it depends on the sector, it depends on the type of business that you are running. So the sustainability map is really enabling you to choose which is the best definition for your company and standard or code of conduct that would probably help you get that measurement as well as possible. So this is why in this example from Florence and Akshata, the person would be a Tanzanian exporter of coffee, but you could have, let's say, a company manager for textiles in India. You could have fruits and vegetables or flowers producer in Colombia. The topic is the same. How do you define sustainability? And there are standards to help you understand the key topics around sustainability. It always evolves around those 5 key dimensions that we have in the database. It's about social responsibility, it is about environmental protection, it is about good management practices, it is about ethics and quality. When you combine the 5 dimensions, so I repeat, social, environment, management, ethics, and quality, once you have a good balance between all these 5 dimensions, you can think that your company is quite sustainable. But obviously, when you communicate to your buyers and your business partners, you better have a certain proof that your company is doing the right things. And this is why there are various standards. There is no one standard, there are various. And we encourage you to learn about those different codes that exist and just actually do a self-assessment, get a diagnostic, and then you have a measurement. But it is a self-measurement. If you want to pay for an external certification, it might be costly and it might not always be the necessary cost, okay, that you need. At the very least, you can use the ITC tool that is free of charge to have a diagnostic and a certain measurement of your sustainability profile according to one standard like UTZ or another one. But there is no one silver magical button again. This is very concrete that you need to identify what is best for your company, and we are offering you a different portfolio of tools and standards to assess yourself. And I hope that this is useful for all of you. You don't need necessarily to have a certificate, but getting the self-assessment really helps you to communicate to your business partners. It helps you to communicate that you're well aware of the social implications of your activities, the environmental potential impacts that it has, etc., etc. So no single answer, no simple one, but a portfolio of solutions for you.
Thank you. I think that's very clear and helpful. I got another question asking, do you think we will see more or less standards in the future?
So that is a very good question. So if you remember from the last webinar, Florence and Akshata highlighted how the whole program at ITC got into shape. That was about 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, we were at the peak of a big wave of new standards. There was a proliferation of labels and standards and tons of initiatives dealing with sustainability. I would say now, 10 years later, there is less acceleration of the number of standards, but there are still new standards coming up. The thing is, there is a trend of consolidation of the standards. Okay, so the standards that deal with cocoa, with coffee, with mango, with sugar, I mean, those standards 10, 15, 20 years ago, they were very ad hoc standards operating in silos. So you have the Fair Trade, you have the Rainforest Alliance, you have the Bonsucro, you have whatever. Today, those single product standards, they tend not to be new ones so often, okay? It's more like cross-cutting standards that evolve and industry platforms that regroup horizontal issues applicable to a whole sector. So there is less new standards, but there are still new standards coming up. The big ones that remain are the ones that probably are the more robust and that have the more potential for market access, like fair trade, like global gap, like Rainforest Alliance, etc. The new ones would be more like industry-wide initiatives that big retailers or big buyers are putting together. So yes, there are new standards, but less now than before, maybe.
Thanks. Another question is on the digital marketing. So the audience is asking how or whether the digital marketing actually helps for the enterprise to be more sustainable.
Well, I guess digital marketing can help in different ways. Digital marketing is facilitating a lot the communication that you have. It brings more transparency about your sustainability processes. It brings your consumers together and it brings them the right message very quickly. Okay, so the digital marketing is more like an acceleration of the good practices and a good vehicle for communication. However, I must make a caveat that more communication is not necessarily more sustainability, right? And there is a trend as well that some companies are communicating a lot without the real concrete substance and the backed up evidence that the good practices are into place. And this is dangerous. So if you oversell your sustainability profile, there is a risk that the buyers will ask for evidence, and then the reputational risk is enormous, and you might be out of business just because you have communicated too much on the wrong things. Okay, so digital marketing is a very powerful tool, but you need to use it in a very wise way. And that, as an example, if you do a self-assessment on Standards Map and you realize that you are close to 100% compliant into brackets to a standard, be careful about communicating about it, because on ITC side, it is a capacity building tool to help you identify where to improve. It is not a self-assessment that we encourage you to share with your buyers saying, look how great I am, because it's very easy. Open Standards Map, answer yes to all the questions and you have 100% fit. Is that the truth? Probably not. So the real thing you can communicate is an external certificate by an external auditor company, but that costs money. So digital marketing is, again, very powerful, but you need to use it in the right way, in the right way.
Yeah, I think that's really necessary to know, beforehand. And then I got another question. It's about like the youth. I mean, youth specifically. Say, because you already mentioned the 5 key dimensions, including social impact. So I was just wondering if there's any specific, say, indicator or factor like related to youth or creation of jobs for youth among all these standards.
Yes, and that is also a very good point. So yes, some of the standards, they empower young entrepreneurs more than others. There are some standards that are really looking at, young entrepreneurs, but also young workers. Okay, so within the supply chains, you have workers that need more trainings, that are new on the job, that are quite young, that have the right to receive more trainings and to be capacitated, and they are more empowered in different levels of the decisions of the companies. So when you look at the details of the Standards Map social dimension and you take, let's say, a few standards and you compare them, so Florence and Akshata showed that in the presentation, you can compare the standards side by side, and you can look at those particular indicators that are about young community, young entrepreneurs, young workers, and see that some standards they have good practices around this. Now, not all the standards do have that, okay? You do have standards that are only looking at local communities without distinction, young communities versus traditional ones, okay? So some standards, they don't make the difference. They would have on the social side, policies for non-discrimination, and this is great, but non-discrimination against gender, race, origin, religion, but it doesn't mention the fact of being young or not young, okay, for kind of positive discrimination on the job. So some standards do it, some others don't. And it's only when you look in the details of the standards map results and you export data side by side that you start understanding that there are some standards that are more young community friendly than others. So it exists. It's just that we haven't seen a standard or a certification that is solely focusing on this and that has the expertise on young entrepreneurs and young enterprises. It is very often a theme, a sustainability area that is enclosed in the standard. It's not, but it's not the core of the standard. Most of the time, it also covers many other aspects.
Yeah, well noted. I think Claire, from Claire's side, she also has some questions. Go ahead.
I actually just wanted to ask a personal question that came up during the presentation, and I'm just going to share my screen again very quickly. I see on this slide that it says immediate versus or immediate major and a check mark. Can you please clarify for the audience what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So you see that all these topics, and it's for inputs and chemicals in the environmental section of the database, but you will have the same for social dimension, child labor, forced labor, discrimination, etc. Those other themes that we discussed before. There are, for each criteria, you have 3 tags. Okay, the first one is the green tag, the green V, and that means yes, this criteria is covered in the standard. So yes, there is something about this criteria and indicator. Like the first one is about a general principle about usage of chemicals or natural organic inputs. So the green tick is yes, it's covered. When you compare side by side some standards, you will see a red cross, and that means missing, not covered, not in the standard. Okay, so that's very easy. That's the first one. The second is called here immediate. When you go to standards map, you will see that there are other options also coming up as a second tag. It could be immediate, it could be short-term, long-term, or it could be optional and recommendation. Okay, so that is actually the degree of obligation when you comply to the standard. When you have the certification process going on, there are certain criteria that are really mandatory, immediately mandatory, and some others that are more like recommendations. Okay, so for instance, if you take the fair trade standard, they are very heavily focusing on social issues. So most of the social issues, they are immediate, they are important, they are mandatory, or maybe short-term, meaning you have 1 year to comply. But on the environmental side, also fair trade covers environmental topics, but maybe sometimes to a lesser extent. Okay, so preservation of biodiversity and forestry issues and water, waste. I mean, this is important, but maybe you will not see this as immediate, but rather a short term or medium term, or sometimes even a recommendation. It's a recommendation to do X, Y, and Z. So the criteria is covered, green tick, yes, but it's either immediate or non-immediate or even a recommendation. That's the thing. And the third tag, the major tag, major comes for the degree of criticality. So that means that no one is perfect. When the auditors go to your business and they assess compliance, they may see that a very important criteria is actually a failure. Okay, you're missing it. So in this case, you see the third criteria says you have a list of authorized chemicals. Okay, so this is immediate and this is a major point. So if the auditor comes and looks that you have used a non-authorized chemical, this is a major problem. It's a major problem. So usually a major problem means you are decertified, you lose your certificate. But sometimes the criteria are not major, but minor. Okay, minor means if you have a problem with that criteria and the auditor sees it, it's a minor problem. So you don't lose the certificate, but you're given, let's say, sometimes it's 3 months or 6 months to correct the action, to make sure that you are doing the right thing, and the auditors come back and they recheck. If it's a minor thing, you don't lose your certificate. If it is major, you may lose it, or you have a very short time to fix the problem. Okay, so this is when you read the criteria in standards map, those are the 3 tags that come with the criteria. The first one is just to confirm, yes, it is covered. The second is, when do you need to do it? Immediately or later, or maybe not because it's optional. And the third one is about, and what if you have an issue? If you have a problem with the audit, either it's a big issue, a major one, sometimes it's actually even critical, but sometimes it's a minor issue. And if it's a minor, you have just more time to correct.
Okay, excellent. That's super clear. Great. So we're at the end of the session. Thanks to everyone from the T4SD team for all of your amazing explanations. I hope that I speak for everyone in saying that it was very clear, very concise. And also, you know, give it a try. It's free to use. You lose nothing by doing it and even doing it wrong and learning from those mistakes. So as Florence showed you all, feel free to go ahead and self-assess. And I'm just going to share again the screen with everyone's email from the T4SD team. So if you do the self-assessment and the results come out and you're not sure what it means for you, you can get in touch with them. So I would advise you all to take a screenshot now, so you have all of these emails on file. I hope Mathieu, Florence, and Akshata, you're ready for a bombardment of emails. And again, we will also be sharing these emails on this whole presentation on the Yay Community Resources page, which Young, if you can share the link to that in the chat box, that would be great. And as this is part of a mini series, we have 2 more episodes coming up in 2021. So be sure to join in for those. And I just want to say thanks to everyone. I'm going to close the session here. But as usual, we would love to take a screenshot and get everyone's face. It's always nice to know who's joining us. So I know some of you don't always turn on your cameras, but if you could just for a minute, turn on your camera and we can take a quick screenshot to learn who are all our young sustainability masters in the audience. It would be really nice for us to see all of your faces. And yeah, so give you a second to just turn on your cameras and look nice, get your hair ready, and then we can take a quick screenshot. So if everyone's ready, I'll go ahead and do that now. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And I want to say thank you and have a great morning. And I'm going to close the session by leaving open the screen with the QR code. So you can just scan that to already be taken to the link to register for the next episode. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mathieu. Thanks, Florence. Thanks, Akshata. Thanks, Young, for taking those questions. And have a happy holiday season. Stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll see you in 2021, where hopefully we can see each other in person again. Inshallah. Have a good morning, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
Thank you so much. Happy holidays. Bye.
Thanks, bye.